Hello, you're tuned into Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-won, and it's good to have you with us. This time next week, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will have met with US President Donald Trump. The White House has announced that the landmark summit will take place in Singapore at 9 a.m. local time. It'll be the first time ever the sitting leaders of the two sides will have met. No other details have been announced, but the confirmation of the time alone suggests progress is being made in talks behind the scenes, and other details can be expected in the days to come. We'll take a further look at what the historic meeting will look like with an expert in the studio later, but first we turn to our news centre where Devin Whiting has the latest stories. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. Tomorrow we'll celebrate Memorial Day here in South Korea, a national holiday to honor those who've died defending the Republic of Korea and those serving in the nation's armed forces. Ahead of that occasion, President Moon Jae-in invited more than 200 people who've made sacrifices for the nation, not only in the military, to a luncheon at the top office. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun has this story.
229 guests with 229 different stories. These officially recognized national heroes and their families were invited to the nation's top office for a luncheon hosted by the South Korean president himself. Tuesday's event was held under the slogan, "We remember you in the name of the Republic of Korea."
보훈은 국민의 마음을 하나로 모으고 강한 국가를 만드는 주춧돌입니다. 나라다운 나라는 국가 유공자와 보훈 가족들이 자부심을 가질 수 있을 때 완성된다는 것이 대통령으로서 저의 확고한 소신입니다.
This was the second meeting of its kind since President Moon took office over a year ago. The guests included the relatives of veterans of the 1950-53 Korean War, heroes of the pro-democracy movement, soldiers who died while defending the nation, and fallen firefighters. But of course, it wasn't just military personnel who were honored. The two teachers who died while rescuing the high school students on board the Seoul ferry in 2014, which, according to the president, was a task originally entrusted to the Coast Guard, were honored posthumously and are now officially recognized as military heroes killed in the line of duty. President Moon stressed that it is the duty of the state to uphold and honor what it means to be a true educator. During the event, the liberal leader first noted the changes he has tried to bring about regarding the way Korea's national heroes and their families are recognized. Such efforts include upgrading the former Agency for Patriots and Veterans Affairs to a government ministry in its own right, allocating nearly $1.9 billion to compensate the veterans, increasing their war pensions to an all-time high, and boosting their medical care deduction rate from 60% to 90%. President Moon said his administration will continue to ensure that patriotism is a core national value and that veterans are honored. He insisted that every last hero needs to be recognized and paid his or her due respect, and that any failure to do so cannot be blamed on a lack of funds or necessary regulations. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Let's try to go a day without using plastic. That's President Moon Jae-in's message on this June 5th, designated by the United Nations as World Environment Day. Highlighting the theme this year, Beat Plastic Pollution, the South Korean president urged all Koreans to join a nationwide movement to spend the day without the use of plastic. He said protecting the environment and saving the planet could seem like goals that are too big and complicated, but they start with small steps in our daily lives, such as using fewer plastic bags. To quote President Moon, if a small inconvenience on my part could amount to a whole lot of convenience for all of us, I believe it's worthwhile. In other news, the UN's nuclear watchdog has stressed that it's ready when the time comes to resume inspections and verifications of North Korea's denuclearization. At a press conference in Vienna on Monday, IAEA Chief Yukiya Amano said the agency is keeping a close eye on recent developments related to Pyongyang's nuclear program. He added that the agency will be able to resume its operations inside North Korea in a matter of weeks, once a political agreement is struck among the relevant parties and authorization is given. The IAEA inspectors were expelled from North Korea in 2009. Some changes are coming to Korea's minimum wage law. Minimum hourly pay was raised at the start of this year by a record amount, but new measures will take some of the sting out of that for businesses by calculating some benefits as part of wage payments. Kim Hae-sung reports.
The cabinet meeting chaired by Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon Tuesday endorsed a revision to the minimum wage law. The amendment, which was passed by the National Assembly last week, includes counting some regular bonuses and welfare benefit allowances when calculating the minimum wage. Korea's business community welcomed the inclusion of the bonuses and welfare allowances in the minimum wage calculation, saying it will help lower the burden of the minimum wage hikes on businesses. This January, Korea raised the hourly minimum wage by over 16% to 7,530 Korean won, or around $7 per hour, the biggest jump in nearly 2 decades. But labor groups have protested against the revision, saying it reduces the effects of a rise in the legal wage threshold by including bonuses and benefits in its calculation, and urging President Moon Jae-in to veto the legislation. The Federation of Korean Trade Unions said Tuesday the passage of the legislation would mean the government has given up on income-led growth. At the cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon said the minimum wage hike and shorter working hours are policies to help improve workers' quality of life, but acknowledged that they are contentious issues and there may be negative side effects in the early stages, and that the government will strive to come up with measures to minimize the negative effects. Now that the revision to the minimum wage law has passed the cabinet meeting, it will be reported in the official gazette once it gets President Moon's approval and will go into effect January 1st next year. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Since 1991, South Korea's steel industry has been the target of almost 100 import restriction measures. It's a cause of concern to Korean steelmakers, with protectionist sentiment rising around the world. Already this year, the local industry has been hit with 6 such restrictions. Jong-un reports.
South Korea's steel industry has long been the target of global trade protectionist measures. Data released by the local steel industry and the Korea International Trade Association shows that since 1991, Korean steel products have been hit with 95 cases of anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties, and import safeguards. Restrictions on steel imports accounted for nearly half of the import restrictions for all South Korean exports. Those restrictions have come from 18 countries and from the EU trading bloc. But 28 of those 95 restrictions have come from the United States. And this year alone, the US, Canada, EU, and Turkey have placed 6 new restrictive measures on Korean steel products. According to an expert from Korea International Trade Association, trade protectionism in the steel sector is due to the difficulty countries have restructuring their domestic industry. He also added that there is an excess supply from newly emerging steel producers like China, which made heavy investments from the early 2000s up until the global financial crisis. With the revision of the US-South Korea trade deal in March, South Korea's steel exports to the US are restricted to the quota of about 2.68 million tons. And the 6 restrictions placed on Korean steel by other countries this year add to concerns among Korea's steel producers. Jong-un, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines at this hour.
The one-week countdown to the North Korea-U.S. summit begins, with the White House announcing the exact time of the historic meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Trump in Singapore. And it could just be the first, as there are continued hints that more meetings could be in the works. Park Hee-jun has this report.
The White House has confirmed the date and time of the North Korea-U.S. summit. It will be held next Tuesday on June 12th at 9 a.m. Singapore time or 10 a.m. Korea time.
And I can also tell you the schedule for tentatively for that first meeting will be on June 12th at 9 a.m. Singapore time and take place at June 11th, 9 p.m. East Coast time.
The press secretary referred to it as the first meeting. That could be seen as confirmation from Washington that there may be follow-up meetings with North Korea even after the summit in Singapore. It also follows the same line as President Trump's recent remarks, where he hinted at the possibility of multiple talks with Pyongyang.
It'll be a beginning, I don't say, and I've never said it happens in one meeting. You're talking about years of hostility, years of problems, years of really hatred between so many different nations. But I think you're going to have a very positive result in the end, not from one meeting.
The White House has also clarified that the Trump administration's policy of maximum pressure through sanctions remains in place and will stay until the regime has abandoned its nuclear weapons.
Our policy hasn't changed, and as the president stated, we have sanctions on. They're very powerful, and we would not take those sanctions off unless North Korea denuclearized.
The White House was clearing up remarks made last week by President Trump following his meeting with a senior North Korean envoy. Trump said last week he didn't want to use the term maximum pressure anymore to describe U.S. pressure on Pyongyang as they were getting along. He also said he looks forward to the day when he can remove the sanctions from the regime. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Now to preview this historic meeting between North Korea and the U.S., we have with us Dr. Bong Young-sik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. Thank you for coming in today.
Pleased to be here.
Now, the White House has revealed that Kim Jong-un and Trump will meet at 9 a.m. in Singapore. However, we currently have no idea actually how long the meeting is going to be and no real details as such. But we don't know if it's going to be a marathon session or if it's just going to be a meet and greet, a short session, as getting to know you session, as Trump has previously suggested. What do you think we should be expecting?
I think we should be grateful that at least the summit meeting is going to happen, and we know the exact time and place that when the meeting is going to take place. So we have to appreciate what you already know. Having said that, there's a lot of uncertainties involved in the summit meeting between President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un still yet, because according to the last press interview of President Donald Trump, it would be just part of the process. He mentioned the word process 9 times recently in the interviews on the summit meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So I don't think there is going to be any definite signing of the big deal between Washington and Pyongyang on the front of the North Korea's denuclearization in ways that will satisfy the demands and expectations of Washington and its allies, or North Korea's expectation of the guarantee of the security of the regime in North Korea. But it will be a very useful and productive first meeting between the two leaders, because at the end of the day, considering the nature of the issue and considering the nature of the North Korean leadership, it should be a top-down approach, not bottom-up, that is more conducive to making breakthrough with regard to North Korea's nuclear and missile programs.
The fact that the details and the time has been announced, but the location hasn't been finalized yet. But we expect it to be the Shangri-La Hotel. What do you make of that choice, and what do you think is the most important aspect of that location?
Well, I think it's facilitating the security and the optic of the groundbreaking summit meeting between North Korea and the United States, because this will be the first time ever that the heads of the two states in a hostile relations is going to have the summit meeting, and Singapore has been chosen as a neutral ground for both countries. Now we have learned that when then CIA Director Mike Pompeo was having a meeting with his counterpart, Vice President, Chairman of the Korean Workers' Party, Kim Young-chol, who delivered the personal letter of Kim Jong-un to the White House. Mr. Kim insisted that the summit meeting had to take place in Pyongyang. He spent 90 minutes of the entire meeting with Mike Pompeo to insist that the meeting to take place in Pyongyang, and the United States government insisted and even threatened to just cancel the meeting. That is only when Pyongyang showed flexibility about the venue of the summit meeting, and Singapore was chosen by both sides, although there was a reservation inside the White House that Singapore might be too close to quote-unquote China. So Shangri-La Hotel has been well known for its annual hosting of the meetings of the defense ministers of many countries, Shangri-La Dialogue. So judging from the fact that the summit meeting is going to deal with the security issues between North Korea and the United States since the Korean War, then it is the right place.
The fact that the detail time has been announced, does it show that progress is being made behind the scenes? For example, like at the talks at Panmunjom?
Well, it depends on how you define progress. If you're talking about progress, that eventually lead all of us to the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of North Korea, then I would say that we have a long way to go, because the process itself, even based upon complete agreement between North Korea and the United States, is estimated to take place about 10 to 15 years, according to a nuclear scientist. So what is important in terms of making the right progress at this point is to confirm the genuine intentions of the North Korean leadership about complete and irreversible denuclearization, meeting the demands of the United States, and North Korea accepting the quid pro quo, the concessions by Washington about how to lift economic sanctions and providing reliable and verifiable security guarantee for the leadership in Pyongyang.
But still, compared to last week when Trump had threatened to pull out of the summit altogether, it's still quite a turnaround. Do you think it shows how badly the two sides really want this summit to happen, especially North Korea, as they've had to almost concede the higher ground after Trump threatened to pull out?
You're absolutely correct that North Korea showed its desperation that it badly needed this summit meeting to make the breakthrough, considering the current situation under the maximum pressure imposed by the UN Security Council resolutions and the unilateral actions by United States, Japan, South Korea, and China. We all know that after President Trump announced his intention to cancel the meeting in the form of issuing the personal letter. Then in less than 9 hours, Pyongyang issued a personal letter written by Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kim Kye-gwan, to show very low-key and conciliatory attitude toward the United States. And although it took the form of personal letter, the letter specifically mentioned that Mr. Kim wrote the letter with the authority delegated from the top. So basically, it's a clear expression of the desperate intentions of Mr. Kim Jong-un to go ahead with the summit meeting. So after that cancellation of the summit meeting by the United States, the balance of power between Pyongyang and Washington quickly shifted in favor of Washington.
Now that the time is set, we can almost start imagining the two meeting happening now. We can see them meeting in the morning, possibly at the Shangri-La Hotel. But there was a US magazine, a Politico magazine, had a very good piece looking at all the aspects of the meeting, from the handshake to the potential meal and gift giving. Now, I'm not going to copy exactly what they talk about, but one of the top priorities on the list was security. How big will the security operation have to be? Because especially with Kim Jong-un leaving the comfort of Pyongyang and North Korea to go to a third country, which he has almost never done.
Right, this will be his first long trip outside the country since he assumed the power in 2011. And there's a lot of concerns about the safety of his trip from Pyongyang to Singapore, because the North Korea's Air Force One, Chanbae No. 1, is a very old airplane manufactured in Soviet Union in 1962. So I think it is unavoidable for Kim Jong-un and his delegation to have a layover in China for refueling and other logistic considerations. And security preparations for Supreme Authority of North Korea outside the country will be the first experience for the security guards of North Korean government and security bureau. So it'll be a big challenge for Kim Jong-un and North Korean delegation. But on the light side, I mean, the world is going to pay attention to how they're going to exchange handshakes.
Yes, of course.
And the other topic of speculation is that as an icebreaker, they might just banter on how they take care of their own famous or infamous hairstyle.
Yes, as you said, they talk about the handshake there, Trump's notorious grip and tug, or grip and pull as they call it. But they also have very other different physical aspects like height and age difference. How important is the image for Kim to not be overpowered by Trump, who has the age and has the height and possibly the physical aspects as well?
It's going to be a big challenge to Mr. Kim Jong-un, I personally think, because it is true that the North Korea's propaganda has been quite improved after Kim Yo-jong assumed the position of the vice head of the propaganda bureau of the Korean Workers' Party. So propaganda programs of North Korea has been finer and more delicate, meeting with global trends and standards. But at the same time, North Korean leader does not want to look weak-kneed in front of his own people, because in the age of the internet, North Korean leadership cannot really block every bit of information about the summit meeting to infiltrate inside North Korea. So it is very important and essential for Kim Jong-un to pose the right image as the absolute and confident leader of North Korea, shoulder to shoulder to the leader of the most powerful country in the world, that is the United States. But as you pointed out correctly, that in terms of physical attributes, then Kim Jong-un needs more polishing. It's a dilemma for Mr. Kim, because if he emphasizes the image of the very strong leader, for instance, wearing the Mao suit, assuming very stern, facial expression, then it doesn't help North Korean leadership look to be ready to become so-called normal country, after it will abandon its nuclear weapons and receiving, economic assistance from outside. But if Kim Jong-un poses exceedingly soft image, for the sake of projecting the image of North Korean leadership, rational and ready to make a strategic decision to join the real world, as Donald Trump once described, then it will not look good in the eyes of North Korean people back home, that your leader is so different from their usual expectations. So keeping the right balance between these two images will be a big issue for Mr. Kim Jong-un.
Now, before we go, there's a couple of things I do want to point out as well. For example, there are reports coming today that says Air China is starting to restart its flights from Beijing to Pyongyang. They were stopped 6 months ago in response to upping the sanctions and pressure on Pyongyang. But now they're starting again. Does it already show that the pressure on North Korea is being lifted? And what does that mean going forward?
Well, one swallow does not make summer, so you do not want to make too much out of this, commercial decision made by Chinese airline company, because there is already a chartered airplane shuttling back and forth between Pyongyang and Cheongdo of China. So China is ready to make its own contributions to providing North Korea economic assistance and economic cooperation programs if the situation is going to be ripe. But as the White House spokesperson announced, that the Trump administration has confirmed that unless North Korea is going to complete the process of denuclearization, then the policy of maximum pressure and maximum engagement will not be changed from maximum pressure to maximum engagement. So if China moves too early ahead of the United States, then China is going to be criticized by Washington as willful, meddling for North Korea. So China is going to be cautious in terms of its resumption of economic cooperation with North Korea.
And finally, North Korean state media so far hasn't really mentioned the U.S. summit over the last few days, and there seems to be no mention of Kim Young-cheol's visit to the U.S. What should we read into this?
Why would they? Why would they, openly celebrate the meeting between Mr. Kim Young-cheol and President Donald Trump in the White House, when the White House made him wait in China and in New York City without giving the green light for him to make a direct trip to Washington, D.C.? considering that he was carrying the personal letter of the Supreme Leader of North Korea. So it was a kind of a cold shower in the eyes of North Korean government. So there's nothing to be openly celebrating by North Korean leadership and sell it aggressively to the North Korean public. So it is kind of the aspect of the negotiations taking place between North Korea and United States, and North Korean government would want to try to minimize.
Well, that's all we have time for today, but I look forward to breaking down the results of the North Korea-U.S. summit after it's finished next time.
I look forward to it.
That's our show for today. I'll be back on Thursday, as tomorrow is a national holiday here in Korea. But do stay tuned to Arirang TV for our other newscasts throughout the day and our special live coverage of the national ceremony marking Memorial Day at 10 a.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching and hope you do join us again next time. Goodbye.